Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Ram Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivraja Kacharya Asto Tarasata Shri Srimad Abhay Charananda Vinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Savior of the whole world, ISKCON BBT founder Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Welcome, dear devotees, as we continue with our reading from the Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam. We're very fortunate to have the wonderful Abhayacharana Ravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada with us today, as well as the beautiful deities of Sri Sri Radha Gopinath, Gauranitai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, Panchatattva, and of course, Nrsingadev. Narayanam namaskritya naram cheva narottamam devim sarasvatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet shinvatam swakata krishna punya shavana kirtanaha hridyantasto yabhadrani vidhunoti suritsatam Nashta prayeshva badreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttamashloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Well, today we're starting a new chapter of this beautiful book, the Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam. So today it's Canto 3, Chapter 17, Victory of Hiranyaksha over all the directions of the universe. And today it is Text 1. Repeatedly, please. Maitreya Uvacha Nisham Yatma Bhuvagitam Nisham Yatma Bhuvagitam Karanam Shanka Yojitaha Karanam Shanka Yojitaha Tata Sarvenyavantanta Tata Sarvenyavantanta Tridivaya Divyokashaha Tridivaya Divokashaha Maitreya Uvacha Nisham Yatma Bhuvagitam Karanam Shanka Yojhitaha Tata Sarvenyavartanta Jidivaya Divokashaha Maitreya Uvacha Nisham Yatma Bhuvagitam Karanam Shanka Yojhitaha Tata Sarvenyavartanta Tridivaya Divokasaha. Prabhus, please. Maitreya Uvacha Nisham Yatma Bhuvagitam Karanam Shanka Yojitaha Data Sarvenya Vartanta Tridivaya Divokashaha Maitreya Uvacha Nisham Yatma Bhuvagitam Karanam Shanka Yojitaha Tata Sarvenya Vartanta Jidivaya Divokasaha. Mataji's, please. Maitreya Uvacha Nisham Yatma Bhuvagitam Karanam Shanka Yojitaha Tata Sarvenya Vartanta Tridivaya Divokasaha. Maitreya, the sage Maitreya, Uvacha, said, Nishamya, upon hearing, Atmabhuva, by Brahma, Gitam, explanation, Karanam, the cause, Shankaya, from fear, Ujhitaha, freed, Tataha, then, Sarve, all, Inyavartanta, returned, Tridivaya, to the heavenly planets, Diva Okasaha, the demigods who inhabited the higher planets. Translation and divine purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sri Maitreya said, the demigods, the inhabitants of the higher planets, were freed from all fear upon hearing the cause of the darkness explained by Brahma, who was born from Vishnu. Thus they all returned to their respective planets. Purport: the demigods, who are denizens of higher planets, are also very much afraid of incidents such as the universes becoming dark, and so they consulted Brahma. This indicates that the quality of fear exists for every living entity in the material world. The four principal activities of material existence are eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. The fear element exists also in the demigods. On every planet, even in the higher planetary systems, including the moon, the sun, as well as on this earth, the same principles of animal life exist. Otherwise, why are the demigods also afraid of the darkness? The difference between the demigods and ordinary human beings is that the demigods approach authority, whereas the inhabitants of this earth defy authority. If people would only approach the authority, then every adverse condition in this universe could be rectified. Arjuna was also disturbed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, but he approached the authority, Krishna, and his problem was solved. The conclusive instruction of this incident is that we may be disturbed by some material condition, but if we approach the authority who can actually explain the matter, then our problem is solved. The demigods approached Brahma for the meaning of the disturbance, and after hearing from him, they were satisfied and returned home peacefully. Om Agyanti Mirandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Svabadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gaudavani Prachadine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyatya Deshacharine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavembhyo Namo Namaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we have this wonderful purport today discussing various concepts such as fear. The demigods were in fear, therefore they approached the authority. So this gives us a great way of understanding if we have fear or if we have some depression, we have some anxiety, we're not completely happy with our Krishna consciousness, then we can approach the authority. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Tad vidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevya upadekshyanti tejanam janinash tattva darshinaha. Just try to learn to approach the spiritual master, render service to him, and inquire submissively. The self-realized souls can reveal knowledge to you because they have seen the truth. So this is a very important verse to help us to understand that even the demigods, they have fears. So the demigods are explained as part jiva and part God. So they still have the fear element present in the demigods. So what chance do we have? We're this infinitesimally small jiva. We have very little control. We have these huge adhyatmic, adibhotic and adidaivic kleshas or disturbances in this world as a result of ourself, disturbances as a result of others, and disturbances as a result of the demigods, the material elements. So we have these huge fears, we have these huge ideas, emotions in our lives that can cause us fear. So what do? We can approach the authorities. So it's very interesting when we study the nature of fear, because there was a recent study performed and it said that 96% of fears are completely imaginary. So only 4% of fears are real. So every day we might wake up and say, oh, I'm afraid to go to the program, or I'm worried about going to that program because I might catch a cold, I might get sick. So 96% of the time, that's actually imaginary. We won't get sick if we go on the program, we won't get sick if we go on Harinam Sankirtan, we won't get sick if we go on book distribution. So essentially, when we look at fear, it's an emotion. It's a natural emotion, and it's a response to a particular situation or event. So in our lives, we have very little control. We know Ishvara Parama Krishna. So Krishna is the supreme controller, and he is in control of everything. So in this chapter, it's describing a person named Hiranyaksha. So Hiranyaksha had a brother named Hiranyakashipu. So he had a gurukul, and he wasn't teaching people Ishvara Parama Krishna. He was teaching people Ishvara Parama Hiranyakashipu. So this is the mood of the demons. They want to be the controller. So they want to control everything. And so you can clearly see the fallacy of demoniac thoughts, of demoniac ideas, by trying to be the controller. So indeed in our lives, we can't control the car accidents, we can't control birth, old age, sickness and death. It simply happens to every single one of us. And there's a beautiful story where this mother, she had, her little baby had died. And so she went to a sadhu and she said, "Dear sadhu, please bring my baby back to life. He's only just been born and now he's died. Please bring him back to life." And the sadhu said, "Yes, I will bring your baby back to life." And then she said, "Great," she was in ecstasy. "My child is coming back. He's going to be alive. I'm so happy." And then so the sadhu said, "Just one prerequisite. You need to go to the village in the house, get a handful of mustard seeds from that one house that has never seen death." So the mother, she said, "Great, that's so easy, just a handful of mustard seeds. It's mustard seed season even. So perhaps all I have to do is go to a house and find a handful of mustard seeds." So she went the whole day, searched every single house in the village, knocked on the door. Do you have any mustard seeds?" "Yes, we have mustard seeds." "Have you ever seen death?" "Yes, in actual fact, my grandfather recently just passed away, died." "Okay, next house." So eventually, the mother came to the realization of acceptance. So when we accept these trials and tribulations in our life, then we can make positive Krishna consciousness growth. And she went back to the sadhu, and now she realized that she merely just had to accept the facts of life, which is birth, sickness, old age, and death. So going on to Krishna has explained the nature of the mind in chapter 6, text 5. Krishna says that for the self-realized soul, the mind is the best friend. For those who have not controlled the senses, the mind is the worst enemy. So often when we haven't reached these high stages of enlightenment, or we haven't come to the position of Goswami, having controlled all the senses, we're still on that platform where our mind is our worst enemy. It's tricking us. It's giving us our fears about the worldwide pandemic, or this catastrophe going off in another country, or this crisis. So essentially, that mind can create fear in us. So essentially, we have to overcome those fears, and the way to do it is through hearing the Shastra, hearing the stories of Krishna consciousness. There's very beautiful shlokas. If we just hear the transcendental literature, particularly the pastimes of Krishna, the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, those sound vibrations can enter into our ears, clean our heart, clean the mirror of the heart, Chaito Dapra Namarjanam, and so therefore we can become free of these irrational fears in our life. Another problem with fear is it's very contagious. So you can see this worldwide hysteria going on, and people read so much news literature, and there's no Bhagavatam, there's no Bhagavad Gita, there's no Chaitanya Charitamrita. So this fear element is rising, and the happiness, or that Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam, the bliss of the chanting of the holy names, is decreasing. So how do we counteract that? You might say, I work a job, I work 40 hours a week, and in that time I'm mostly associating with materialists who are very fearful, very angry. So what do I do? So essentially, if we look at our parampara, we had also a Grihastha Bhaktivinoda Thakur who was working 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the evening as a magistrate, but to balance that, he also had a very extensive bhajan program. So he sung a lot of bhajans, he heard a lot of transcendental literature, he went to Jagannath Babaji's Srimad Bhagavatam class. So this is the way we can balance if we have these huge forces of materialism in our life. We meet materialistic people on book distribution, or we meet materialistic people in our workplace. We can overcome that by balancing it with hearing the Shastras, sitting down at the evening, hearing Ramayana, hearing the Bhagavatam, hearing the Bhagavad Gita. So these are very things that can counteract this fear element. So if we look at the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna very explicitly discusses the qualities of the divine personalities. So this is present in chapter 16, text 1, and indeed it says, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, and the first one, Abhayam Sattva Samshuddhim. So Sattva Samshuddhim is purification of one's existence, and Abhayam is this fearlessness. So don't we feel good when we meet someone who's fearless? Don't we meet even in our family or friends, we meet someone who's fearless. Hey Prabhu, let's go out on book distribution. There's so many people who would say, I can't, I might catch a cold, or let's go out on, there's a big festival, let's go and go there and go to Vrindavan for Parikram. Guru Maharaj will be there, and so I'm worried about getting the flu, or there's so much conflict going on. But when we meet the fearless people, and who's the most important fearless person in our lives? Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. His name given to him by a pure devotee, Gora Mohan Dey, Abhay, fearless. So from birth they consulted the astrology charts and they realized, yes, Abhay Charanaravinda will be a fearless personality. He will be very successful, will be one of the richest people in the whole of India. And so he's fulfilled that prophecy and more. So if we associate with Srila Prabhupada, at any time we can hear Srila Prabhupada reciting the Bhagavad Gita shlokas perfectly. At any time we want to hear a Chaitanya Charitamrita class, Prabhupada's there on ISKCON Desire Tree, just press play on the internet. You can hear Prabhupada giving a beautiful class on Chaitanya. You can hear how Chaitanya came into the world by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada dedicated his life to propagating the Krishna book, which gives us a beautiful understanding of how Krishna was born in the womb of Devaki. All Prabhupada can personally read it to you. You can sit there for many hours a day and hear Prabhupada. This is the thing that will help us overcome the fear. Because what is the result of fear? The result of fear is anger. The result of fear is arrogance. The result of fear is conceitedness, which is vanity. So essentially, if we hear from Prabhupada, we will overcome all these demoniac qualities and we will develop more qualities of kindness, compassion, altruism, loving relationships. So essentially, if we look at the characters of Srimad Bhagavatam who didn't quite understand this knowledge that Prabhupada is giving us, Maharaj Chitraketu, he had 1 crore of wives, which means he had 100,000 wives. This is Maharaj Chitraketu. Not only that, every single one of his wives had 100 maidservants. So he had in total 10 million maidservants. Would you like us to iron your shirt, Maharaj Chitraketu? What would you like for lunch today? Would you like us to pick some flowers? 10 million women at his beck and call, Maharaj Chitraketu. Such a powerful devotee. Essentially, what was his fear? His fear was he wouldn't be able to have progeny that would be able to keep his lineage going. And it consumed him, despite the fact he had almost half the population of Australia as female maidservants. He rang a bell, they would just run. What do you want? 10 million maidservants. His only meditation was, I don't have a son. Only meditation. It absorbed his thoughts, everything. How are you feeling today? I don't have a son. This is Maharaj Chitraketu. So what can we learn from that? We can learn the attitude of gratitude, looking what we do have in our environment, looking at this great temple that Srila Prabhupada has built for us, the great sacrifice that the devotees have to put a meal on for us every breakfast. We can have a meal. The attitude of gratitude will overcome this sense of conceitedness. There's another Maharaj Anga, same situation, had so much opulence. His kingdom was flourishing, and yet he had one uncultured son. Out of all of his sons, only one was uncultured, and as a result of that, it consumed him. Or my progeny is going to be destroyed, everything will be gone. So that is what consumed his mind. He didn't have this same capacity that we have now to hear Prabhupada, to hear the transcendental literature, and we can overcome these fears. There is a very beautiful devotee who became a Goswami. His name was Bharat Hari. And so in married life, he wrote a book by the name of Sringara Ras, 1,000 Ways Which My Wife is Beautiful. Then his wife left him, and he wrote another book, Vairagya Ras, 1,000 Ways That the Renunciation is Beautiful. So this is a great example. Even in loss, we can have a change of mind, a change of heart, as long as Krishna is there. So what are the fears in life? For the beautiful person, old age is the most fearful thing. For the person who is virtuous, vilification is the most fearful thing. For someone who's born in a high family, having progeny that won't follow or live up to the standard, that's the greatest fear. So for the wealthy person, the dacoits is the most fearful thing. So you see the rich people, even in Australia, they have these huge compounds with electrified fences, lest someone might steal one tiny little thing of theirs. This whole fear of it's mine, this nira ahankara, or the sense of nirmamo, this sense of proprietorship, which in the devotees isn't there. Krishna explains, nirmamo nirahankara yo mad bhakta samepriyaha. For those who have no sense of proprietorship and no false ego, they are very dear to me. So recently, there was a very beautiful story in Mumbai where they had this lift, and it was 14 stories up, and then every single resident who got into the lift was explaining, the lift is so slow, it's taking me so long to get home. Then the owners realized, perhaps if we just install mirrors inside the lift, then we'll see what happens. So as a result of that, everyone started complaining, the lift is too fast. Because now they had the divine vision of themselves in the mirror. No Krishna consciousness, but just gazing up lovingly upon their own form, and therefore they wanted more time to see themselves in the mirror. This is what Krishna is explaining in 16.4 of the Bhagavad Gita. Conceitedness is a demoniac quality. It means if we want to have a bigger mirror for ourselves, then a very tiny, might have deities at home, and we say, okay, here's a tiny little mirror for you, Krishna, but we've got our own personal mirror is like floor to ceiling. So this is the element of conceitedness. So we have to have the huge mirrors for Krishna. As the devotees in ISKCON Mayapur, they're fully grown men struggling to hold up their full mirrors so Krishna can see himself. This is the love, this is the servitude for Krishna. So it's also our own desires can create fear. So we might have this desire, I want to be a great student, I want to have a great job, I want to be a Fortune 500 member CEO. So these can create fears in us, because we're looking too far into the future and we're creating unrealistic expectations. So we have to have realistic expectations, and then this idea of fearfulness will completely go away. So essentially, in the Vaishnava literature, we can see a number of times where the fears were real. So we know Draupadi was in the assembly, and then all the people there were trying to disrobe Draupadi. So then who did Draupadi call out for? In her greatest, most fearful moment, she called out for Krishna. So that crawling out to Krishna essentially was the presage or the pre-eventual situation for the whole battlefield of Kurukshetra. And so Krishna indeed killed all the miscreants on the battlefield. So even if we go back to the battlefield of Kurukshetra, someone as great as Arjuna still had fear. We know he's explaining the bow Gandhaiva is falling from my hands. He's trembling out of fear, seeing the opposite battle, his paternal family members on the opposite side of the battle who were then going to be in a fight with him. So essentially, we can also be afraid of bad association. Srila Prabhupada told a very beautiful story about the monkey and the crocodile. So the monkey was in the tree, and the crocodile simply swam across to the tree and said to the monkey, "Perhaps you would like to jump onto my back and I can take you out into the middle of the river." So the monkey was quite innocent and naive, and then he thought, okay, I'll jump onto the back of the crocodile, and the crocodile will swim me out to the middle of the river. And indeed, that was what happened, at which point the crocodile turns to the monkey and says, "Well, I'm going to eat your heart. That's why I brought you out here. You were so naive and impetuous, you didn't understand. I'm going to eat your heart." So essentially, then the monkey said, "Well, I've left my heart in the tree. Can you take me back to the river, the side of the river, and I'll bring the heart for you, and then you can eat it." So then the crocodile took the monkey to the side of the river. The monkey ran off up into the tree, never to be seen again. So the moral of this story, Srila Prabhupada is saying, yes, we can have bad association with the crocodiles of this world, to the sense gratifiers, to the prideful people, to the arrogant people, to the conceited people, to the angry people. We can have that bad association, but the element is to never give them our heart. We don't love those people, the crocodiles of this world, the prideful people, any of those arrogant situations. So essentially, as we go deeper into the understanding, we now have the level of understanding that perhaps fear in our bhakti yoga isn't such a good thing. Indeed, if we look at Dhyana Yoga, chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is explaining, even to meditate on Krishna, there has to be an absence of fear. So when we're literally sitting in our meditation, when we're chanting our japa, and we're trying to visualize Krishna's lotus feet, we're trying to meditate on the divine form of Sri Krishna, Sri Radha in the Yugal pair, then there has to be an absence of fear. So we can't be in a situation where we think, I might be thrown out of my house in a week, so therefore there's fear. So we have to minimize that. There has to be sattva, or goodness, prevailing first before we can get to Vishuddha Sattva, or the transcendental pure goodness. So therefore we have to make these situations that our life can become fearless. Also, perhaps importantly, is 1866 of the Bhagavad Gita, one of our favourite shlokas, because indeed Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, if there's a beautiful place in Vrindavan called Radhakund and Shamakund, and then in between Radhakund and Shamakund is the sanctum, and that sanctum was the place where Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had a meeting with Srila Prabhupada. In that meeting, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explained the beautiful shloka to Srila Prabhupada. Sarva Dhamman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Praja Vraja Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo Mokshayashyami Ma Shuchaha. So it's explaining, Bhaktisiddhanta, abandon all varieties of religion and surrender unto me. This is Krishna. So the duty of the spiritual master is to help the facilitation of the jiva to surrender to Krishna. And then so what do we get out of it? Ma suchaha, do not fear. So fear element will not be present in that individual who has surrendered to Krishna, because Krishna will take care of everything. We know yada yada hi dharmasya glenir bharati bharata abhutanam adharmasya tadat majami majamaham paritranaya sadhanam vinashaya chaduskritam dhamma samstapanaya teya sambhavami yuge yuge. So Krishna manifests in order to protect the devotees and to annihilate the miscreants. So Krishna takes care of everything. Not a blade of grass moves without his sweet will, and he can indeed protect us. So right now we're thinking to ourselves, okay, fear isn't such a great thing. Fear, when it comes up in our lives, perhaps we need to develop remedial strategies in order to overcome the fear. And then perhaps to overcome or to complicate things even a little bit further, we can say that there is fear in the residents of Vrindavan. So there's a beautiful pastime where Mother Yashoda looks into the mouth of Krishna and she sees the entire universal creation, and Srila Prabhupada's explanation is Mother Yashoda experienced fear and wonderment as a result of looking into Krishna's mouth. So therefore, there is an element of transcendental fear or spiritual fear. And it's very important for us to understand. There was a morning walk with Chidahari Prabhu and Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Chidahari asked the question, I'm in so much anxiety, I'm in so much fear that perhaps I won't be able to follow the regulative principles and chant 16 rounds a day. Is this transcendental fear because I'm fearful of not being able to chant my quota of rounds? And Srila Prabhupada turned to him and said, no, transcendental fear means when Mother Yashoda can't give milk to Krishna. And that was with such a fierce, loving way of saying it that Chidahari never made the mistake again of thinking that the fear that he was experiencing was on the same level as Mother Yashoda. So essentially there's a beautiful chapter in the Krishna book, chapter 60, which explains the talks of Krishna with Rukmini. So as we know, Krishna is our favorite wonderful personality from Goloka Vrindavan, and he has relationships with so many different devotees. And there's a beautiful story when he left Vrindavan to go to Dwarka, and he married Rukmini. And there's a beautiful story where Rukmini was set to marry Shishupal, and then Krishna, in his most chivalrous attitude, he came there and he kidnapped Rukmini because she wrote him a letter, I'm set to be married to this demon, please come and help me. And then Krishna, in his chivalry, he came and he kidnapped on her wedding day Rukmini and then married her for himself. So then later on, Krishna has these talks with Rukmini. And Krishna, he says to Rukmini, I don't know what this love between a husband and a wife is. I don't know if it is even worthwhile. Why am I in this loving relationship with you? All my disciples are renunciates, so perhaps this isn't the right thing to do. At which point, Rukmini experienced this tremendous fear. There's an aspect of prema which is called prema vaichicha, or it's a fear of separation from one's lover, even when they're personally present there. So prema vaichicha was very prominent in the damsels of Dwarka. And Rukmini, she demonstrated this prema vaichicha, and it's explained that immediately she lost so much weight that the bangles fell off her hand. So out of fear, she lost weight and she became completely morose, and she was feeling the separation of Krishna. This fear element was very much present in her. And so then to make matters all good, at the end, Krishna said, I'm only just joking with you. I wouldn't do such a horrific thing as leave you. So please, and that was enough to bring Rukmini back into an attitude of happiness and Krishna consciousness. So when we look at fear, it is present there in the residents of Vrindavan. So as we know from previous verses, it was explaining there's 5 primary rasas or relationships with Krishna. There's Santya Ras, Dasya Ras, Sakya Ras, Vatsalya Ras, Madhurya Ras, which is passive adoration, servitude, friendship, parenthood, and conjugal love. So those are the 5 primary rasas. And then as we go, there's 7 secondary rasas. Chivalry, comedy, and fear is one of those secondary rasas. So even in conjugal love, in romantic love, there's fear there. Fear that the lover might go away, fear that the lover won't always be present in the life. So that's the fear in the conjugal ras. Then the fear in the motherhood. I went into the study of Mother Yashoda. When does Mother Yashoda become fearful? She becomes fearful when Krishna is growing up, such that she won't have so much association with her own son. She becomes fearful when Krishna learns how to walk, because he can walk out of her little bhajan kutir, and Mother Yashoda won't be able to catch Krishna. So these are the fears of Mother Yashoda. Mother Yashoda is also fearful of Krishna being hurt. because she doesn't understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's eternally pure. He never becomes dirty. But Mother Yashoda's fear is that Krishna might be hurt. And there's a beautiful pastime where Krishna is leaving the house for the first time. Balaram manages to convince Mother Yashoda, I'll take care of him, I'm strong, I've got a loud voice, I can take care of my little brother Krishna, so please let us go out, we can have a picnic in the forest. And Mother Yashoda eventually said, okay, you're old enough now, you guys are really determined to go out and have fun in the Goloka Vrindavan. And so then, before they're about to leave, Mother Yashoda said, you can go out with Balaram, but make sure you never let go of his hand. So this is the element of being fearful of the safety of Krishna, despite the fact that we know that there's no one that could ever injure Krishna at all. Krishna is complete in the 6 opulences: knowledge, wealth, beauty, renunciation, fame, and power. No one will ever be able to defeat him. And so then we can look at also, that's the fears in Vatsalya Ras. So the fears in friendship are also the fears of separation and the fears of servitude. When your master is no longer there, who is going to be able to give me instructions? So these are all the fears present in the secondary ras according to all the 5 primary rasas. So I found a very beautiful bhajan of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which explains or goes into a depth about this fear element. Anicca e kalebar kabu nahe stidratar samana aile kichunai e anga sitala hobe anki spanda hinarobe chitar agune hobe chai. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is singing that this body will eventually become the food of dogs and jackals. So essentially it's teaching us this understanding that we are not this body. We should overcome this sense of overly cherishing the body. So the body will eventually become food for the dogs and jackals. It also explains in the second verse about the fallacy of society, friendship, and because eventually we will just be going into the crematorium grounds, the body will be burnt, so there's no necessary desire to be overly protective of the body or overly protective of friendship or society. And finally, in the last verse, it says, what should we be protective of? We should be protective of the Harinam Yagya. It should be very protective of japa, of our sadhana. That's when we should be very protective. So essentially, if we study the life of Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, he recently had his 50 years sannyas anniversary, and he hasn't missed one Mangalarti for over 50 years. And so it was asked of him, how did you maintain such a strong sadhana? Surely you must have had health problems along the way. How did you develop your immune system to make sure that you could live this 50 years of never missing a Mangalarti, never missing a Guru Puja, and having a very strong presence in the Sankirtan Yagya of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? So his response was, he went to bed at the same time every night and he woke up at the same time every morning. Srila Prabhupada gave this beautiful instruction about regulated life. So regulated life means going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, and also taking meals at the same time every day. So this provided some sense of peacefulness in his mind. He was able to get to that platform of Vishuddha Sattva, chanting Shuddha rounds or Nam Shuddha Nam. And so that's why he has such powerful presence in Krishna consciousness. He's an executive GBC member. So he had this element of going to bed, same meals every day, very much regulated in his life. And so that's how he maintained his strength in bhakti. So I also found another beautiful describing fear. Fear arises when a living entity misidentifies himself as the material body because of absorption in the external illusory energy of the Lord. So we know Daivyesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya. This material energy of Krishna's is very difficult to overcome. So we can overcome it through the loud chanting of the holy names of the Lord. That's why every morning we sing Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam, all victory to the Sankirtan Yagya of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it was so inherent in Srila Prabhupada's teachings that he wanted everyone to know that please believe me when I say you are not this body. So it was really emphasizing on that point. We are not material body, we're eternal spiritual soul. So that can help us to overcome this fear element of being misidentified with the material body. This is the particular shloka, Srimad Bhagavatam 177, Yasyam Vaishruya Manayam Krishne Parama Purushe Bhaktir Utpadyate Pumsa Shoka Moha Bhayapaha. Simply by giving oral reception to this Vedic literature, the feeling for loving devotional service to Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, sprouts up at once to extinguish the fire of lamentation, illusion, and fearfulness. So we have to hear the transcendental literatures of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's very powerful, extinguishing material lamentation, illusion, and fearfulness. And then the prize we get for that is eternal life with Krishna in Goloka Prem Dham, to be completely free from these material sufferings. Even if we go to, you might say, okay, we've spoken about the fear element in material life, we've spoken about the fear element of the gopis in Vrindavan, so then you might say, does Krishna himself demonstrate fear? And we know that from every Kartik we sing the Damodarastakam prayers, which is Rudantam Muhurnetram Yugmam Rijantam Karam Boja Yugmena Satanka Netram Muhushvasa Kampatrira Kanka Kanta Stita Krevam Damodaram Bhakti Vadham. So seeing the whipping stick in his mother's hand, he is crying and rubbing his eyes again and again with his two lotus hands. His eyes are filled with fear, and the necklace of pearls around his neck, which is marked with 3 lines like a conch shell, is shaking because of his quick breathing due to crying. To this Supreme Lord, Sri Damodar, whose belly is bound not with ropes, but with his mother's pure love, I offer my humble obeisances. So indeed, Krishna has this element of showing that he's fearful as well. It doesn't mean that necessarily he is afraid, but he does show his devotees that he is fearful. So today we've looked at fear from a number of different perspectives, how we can overcome fear, how we can encourage those people around us to become free from fear, mainly by hearing the transcendental literatures, always having the Krishna book in our hands so that we can lovingly hear the recitations, the oral reception of the books. It will go into our heart. We will become free from the material lamentation, misery and fear, and then we can live these lives of happy, vibrant, glorious devotees of Sri Krishna and enter into his Sankirtan Yagya. So at this point, let's have a look. Yes, so we've discussed so many things. Does anyone have any questions at all? Or?
I'd just like to add something.
Sure.
Not add, I mean just exactly what you're saying. I was also reading the same thing. The only way that we can overcome fear is by understanding that we're not this body. All the relationships are temporary. Wealth is temporary. Everything in this world is temporary, and Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And by having that meditation, we can become fearless, and of course by reading Bhagavatam, like you said.
Yeah.
No, that was pretty awesome. And also my Guru Maharaj was just sharing recently in his class that there are Vaishnavas and devotees in Sri Vrindavan, and for them, they say that their only wealth is the Braj, Kanthimala, Tulsi beads, and their only ornament is the Vishnu Tilak that Tulsimala, Kantimala, and Vraj, and I'm only ornamented Krishna Lila.
Yeah, it's a beautiful point, and going back to Bharat Hari Goswami's Vairagya Ras, explaining that the wealthy person is afraid of dacoits. So if our only wealth is the transcendental literature or transcendental paraphernalia of Radha and Krishna, which will always be present in our lives, then essentially we won't have any material fears. Our fears will only be those transcendental fears of, for the devotee, the biggest fear is forgetting Krishna. So it's not about losing wealth or losing prestige or losing money. It's about losing the real treasure of Krishna consciousness or forgetting Krishna. So it's a very beautiful point. And I was thinking about how Indrajumna Maharaj really does walk that talk of all his biggest treasures are either like tulsi neck beads, or he has the paraphernalia. For instance, he has a little bit of paper from Raghunath Bhatta Goswami's personal Srimad Bhagavatam writings, so over 500 years ago, so old. So these are the real treasures of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the actual items of paraphernalia from the Goswamis and from Krishna himself. So thank you so much for attending. And one question is... Yeah.
Theoretically, I know I'm not my body, like because Prabhupada said me.
Yeah.
But still acting as we are body. And have a lot of fear.
Yeah.
And other things. So does it mean how we overcome it? Like maybe it's lack of knowledge or lack of association. I mean, like, I guess it's like what we learn from these classes. How to develop this fearless thing?
Yeah, so it's a beautiful question, and thank you so much for asking that. So how to develop the quality of fearlessness? So essentially, we have to have significant attention when we're chanting our rounds, and also attentiveness when we're hearing the literature. And so in our lives, if we understand what we do on a daily basis, like how much attention do we give to the material world, and how much attention are we giving to the transcendental literatures, or loudly chanting the holy name. And if you look at the great personalities like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, you can see his actual daily schedule was so rich with Krishna consciousness. It was like waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning, bhajan for an hour and a half, then he'd have a small something to eat or drink, and then he would do an hour and a half or 2 hours of japa, and then he would do... so it was his life, his daily schedule was so rich with Krishna consciousness. And there's a beautiful conversation that, someone asked Jayapataka Maharaj, how come you're not fearful? What are you doing? And he said, I'm too busy for fear. So we can busy ourselves.
I'm too busy to lust.
Yeah.
I'm lusty, but I don't have...
Yeah, so that's how we can make ourselves busy. It's explained that, the idle mind is the devil's workshop, or if we really fill our daily schedule with so much Krishna consciousness, we can get to that stage of being free from the bodily contamination or the ideas of the body, protectionism. And we've all experienced that to one extent or another. If we've gone like on a 6-hour Harinam with Kadamba Kanana Maharaj, and your eyes are beaming and just like, here, Krishna, 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 and you really, yeah. But then there's the same thing, or the Sunday feast program is so big, and there's the Gaurarti, and then I really feel I'm not the body, and they'll wake up tomorrow morning, and it's like, oh, who's going to pay the bills, So we have to maintain our consistency and really fill our minds with Krishna consciousness, and any sort of material things that we have to be involved in. We have to at least balance it with Krishna conscious activities, Krishna conscious Katar, and that will help us at least to be moving in the right direction of the qualities of the divine qualities of kindness, compassion, loving relationships, and less from the pride, arrogance, conceitedness, anger, and all those detrimental qualities. So.
Also, I'd just like to say, like you're saying, you self-associate, even personally, I think I also feel sometimes so much fearful, and then nothing is in my control, and then I feel, wow, I'm so minuscule. Even though I can take fear and I can try and micromanage everything, but I'm still a failure. And like you said, I think only thing that works is sadhana meditation and
Yeah.
and that just relieves you of that.
Yeah, I think that anything like that, because I have experienced first year I started reading Bhagavad. When I was one day, I read about 6 hours and more, and I become so happy. I was surprised, what it's about.
Yeah.
Like I feel it's like from there. And
Yeah.
then I listen to lectures and they say like yes, it's like everything like would be all like Guru Maharaj said, like when you have time, chant.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is true. But sometimes we are like absorbed in this daily life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that trying to make our mind our best friend.
Did we see like all this in this path and all this absorbed? Like, maybe not. We are like not GBC.
Yeah. Yeah. Association. Prabhupada gave the example when you put an iron in the fire, the iron will start developing the same qualities as the fire. So when we hear Srila Prabhupada, even Srila Prabhupada's voice alone is so powerful, particularly Chaitanya Leela, because Chaitanya is here for the members of Kali Yuga. We're so offensive and we're so sinful, but Srila Prabhupada is the mercy, Lord Chaitanya is the mercy incarnation to deliver all the fallen conditioned souls. So if we just see the most potent thing of overcoming the fear is Lord Chaitanya Leela, particularly if Srila Prabhupada is personally reading it to us. So we've got the words or the actual sound vibrations of an eternally perfect soul, a pure devotee, entering into our ears, and therefore we can really develop these qualities of moving towards fearlessness and abhayam. Yes?
So you mentioned about association. Maybe we work with material and then we hardly come to meet weekly once or twice to temple.
Yeah.
That's what the association we have. Otherwise, like 99.99% of the time goes in that field.
Yeah.
How do we develop the association? How do we inculcate the mood and everything?
Yeah, it's a great idea. It's a great question, and thank you so much for asking. So essentially, no one has control over our hearts in the workplace. So even if we're engaged in an IT business or some financial job, we can be doing that, but we can still be remembering Krishna. So, and also, so we have to be sitting down in a job for 40 hours, 60 hours a week, but then the rest of the time can be given to Krishna. So even you can get like a smartphone with some earphones, and you can hear on the train on the way to work, hear those transcendental sound vibrations. So the whole day is set up thinking about Krishna, and then thinking I'm doing this job for Krishna. And it's very interesting if we go to chapter 18 of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna personally explains that there is renunciation in the mode of passion. So if we renounce our job and our work, it's too hard, I'm bodily discomfort, I'm fearful of more bodily discomfort as a result of my work, so therefore I'm going to give it up. Krishna says this is renunciation in the mode of passion, and it won't lead to perfect renunciation. So therefore we have, if we look at our schedule, we have so much time on a weekly basis which is not at work, so we have to learn that when the siren goes off, or that 5 p.m. time hits when that day is over from our workplace, that's the time when we decide to become very Krishna conscious, and therefore we can really make positive advancement every day, just simply by, as soon as we might be in the car driving home, or